This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
We're down to the final couple of days before this federal Liberal leadership race wraps up. And in just a second, you're going to talk you're going to hear from the former Deputy Prime Minister, former Finance Minister of Canada. She was, rumblings around Chrystia Freeland for years before she officially threw her hat into the ring, as folks would muse about what the post-Trudeau Liberal Party might look like. Indeed, she is seeking that role as leader of the Liberals, the next Prime Minister of Canada, the one that will call the next federal election. But when? Not everybody's given her a fighting chance. If you've been paying attention to mainstream pundits, they pretty much acted as though Mark Carney's going through a coronation process. We're going to ask Ms. Freeland what she makes about all this, what Canada might look like under her direction, that 100% tariff on Teslas, Canada's future with Ukraine, and a whole lot more. Plus, this week, Canadians have remembered the ultimate sacrifice paid by 4 RCMP members. It's hard to believe, 20 years ago near Mayerthorpe, Alberta. We commit a very special edition of the Real Talk Roundtable to remembering the legacy of the fallen 4. This episode of Real Talk would not happen without the support of Rello. That's Alberta's top online real estate school, and you can find them online right now at rello.ca, where better real estate training starts. This is a message not to those of you that are maybe already working in real estate, but those of you that are watching them. Those of you that are seeing them set their own hours and help people buy or sell that perfect residential or commercial property. You see the unlimited earning potential. Meantime, your feet are just stapled to the floor in your cubicle at work. It's time to say goodbye. It's time to say hello to Rello and choose your course. Get your real estate career started today. You'll get the best of both worlds with Rello. They'll get you licensed easily. You'll save on costs, and then you're going to get support and business tips from experienced real estate professionals at Rello. They're all about value. You can read more on their website, rello.ca. That's RELO.ca. Make sure you use that promo code Ryan100 if you sign up for the Alberta residential or commercial real estate bundles. That'll knock $100 off your investment on both of those fronts. That's Ryan100, all one word, when you get started today at rello.ca. Well, Chrystia Freeland, I can guarantee, is not wasting a minute of these next couple of days. This is the crunch time. This is the finish line in sight. We will know by the next episode of Real Talk who the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada is. That individual will automatically be the next Prime Minister of Canada, and we'll head into an election to fight Pierre Poilievre to form the next government. We're grateful that Chrystia Freeland has been able to find some time to talk to us on this Friday. It's nice to see you again. It's been a hell of a race. How would you characterize it so far?
It is great to see you again too, Ryan. I always love our conversations. The race for me has been really fun. It has been a real personal liberation. I am just loving the chance to be totally my own woman, to advocate directly for the policies I believe in, and to have so many great conversations with Liberals across the country. I've had a great time in Alberta. I've been in Calgary, I've been in Edmonton, I've been in Peace River, I've been in Grand Prairie, and I've had great conversations in every single one of those places.
When you talk about being your own woman, I know, congratulations, by the way, your interview with Bill Maher. Interesting to see. You get McCarty on Jon Stewart, we get you on Bill Maher. We've got like the two most prominent Canadian Liberal politicians going on two of the most prominent American platforms, millions of views. It appears to have paid off. But you talked about your former boss, Justin Trudeau. You talked about virtue signaling. You talked about, identity politics. Is that something where you think that this party needs to pivot?
I said what I believe. It was actually just last Friday to Bill Maher. I do think that the Liberal Party wins when we're in the center, when we're talking to Canadians about the things they really believe in, the things they care about how to make their life better. And I do think that people felt we were getting a little bit too focused on identity politics, on virtue signaling, maybe on making ourselves as individuals look good rather than listening to Canadians and talking to them and doing what they need.
Do you feel like the media has given you a fair shake in this race? There's been a lot of talk. I mean, pollsters are going, under a Carney government, this is what the polling looks like. People are talking about Mark Carney this, Mark Carney that. You deputy PM, you were the finance minister. There's a bunch of buzz around you for a lot of years. How have you taken that in the quiet moments?
Well, the polls have been closing, and people have seen that. There's been some reporting on that. This is definitely a competitive race. And I want to say to people who want to see me as Prime Minister and the next leader of the Liberal Party, get out and vote. You can make a real difference. And you have until 3 p.m. Mountain Time today, Friday, to get accredited to vote. And then until 1 p.m. or no, I have the time. Yeah, I have the timing wrong.
1 p.m. Mountain, 3 p.m. Eastern, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Are you?
No, it's 3 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.
Oh, got it. Okay, 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Eastern, 3 Mountain, 5 Eastern. We've done it.
Correct. We did it.
We've
we
done
managed
it.
to do it.
Are
Yes.
you? Hey, listen. To be candid for a second, I'm not. I mean, I've just been paying attention to what some people are saying about this process, and I know the party's been saying this is the most secure, the most valid election process in Canada. But a lot of people, they've got to get their ID verified at a post office, and they got to drive around. A lot of people are saying it's quite frankly a bit of a pain in the ass. Are you concerned about that? Are you concerned about that chasing people away?
Look, it has been challenging. I know just from talking to my dad, he had to go to 2 post offices to get verified, but he got there in the end and he has voted. So I would just say to everyone, it is a competitive race. Get out and vote. You can make a difference. We are lucky to have a democracy. And you know what? You don't have a right to bitch about who is in charge of Canada if you don't manage to vote.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you think you've done enough to differentiate yourself from Justin Trudeau? That's probably, would you agree that's been your biggest assignment? That's been your biggest mandate through this leadership race?
Not exactly, Ryan. Like my biggest mandate has been to say what I believe, to listen to Canadians, and to hear what they are thinking and what they want, and to put forward the plan that I think Canada needs right now. That's been my biggest mandate. I've been focused on who I am, what I would do, why I am the best leader for Canada right now. And, Ryan, like a thing I don't like about politics is, there it can be a certain kind of braggy egoism in it. And I think politics at its best needs to be about listening to people and serving people. But I will say, I got into this race. I threw my hat in the ring. I committed myself and my family to a really grueling process because I really believe that I am uniquely qualified to lead Canada in this truly challenging time. And I've been consistent. When I resigned from the cabinet in my resignation letter, I said that was because I felt the government was on the wrong path and that we needed to be rigorously, uniquely focused on the threat that President Trump represented. That was on December 16th. And I'm sad to say I have been proven right. I launched my campaign on January 17th, and my central focus of my campaign was standing for Canada, fighting for Canada. I was right. And, I have been foreign minister. I've been trade minister. I've been intergovernmental affairs minister. I've been finance minister. I am a battle-tested political leader with the experience that we need right now and with a proven track record. I have done trade deals, including a great deal with the United States. I have done security deals, including strengthening our partnership with Europe, something we need desperately right now. I have gotten the infrastructure that Canada needs, the trade diversifying infrastructure Canada needs built, including getting the Trans Mountain Pipeline built and up and running this spring. I have been the leader of providing support to Ukraine, which is on the front lines of the battle between democracy and dictatorship. So, Ryan, I'm putting myself forward, and to anyone who is listening, please get yourself accredited to vote today and vote by Sunday, because I know that I am the leader that Canada needs right now, who has a plan, who has the experience to deliver on it, and crucially, who has the guts, not just to go along to get along, to make tough decisions, to take risks when that is what needs to happen to stand for Canada and to fight for Canada.
You made headlines last week. I like it. Quite frankly, 100% proposing a 100% tariff on Teslas. You hit Elon Musk right between the eyes on that one. But the story is obviously much bigger than just auto tariffs or just Elon Musk. Everybody had news cameras out at liquor stores in Manitoba and Ontario this week, watching staffers put the Jack Daniels out and then take it back off and then put it back out and then take it back off as Trump pauses and then unpauses the tariffs. What are we doing right now? What are we doing wrong right now when we're talking about elbows up Canada and fighting Donald Trump? This trade war, I mean, this is loaded language. What do we need to change about it? What are we doing on the right path?
Well, Brian, I wouldn't say it's loaded language. I would say it's appropriate language. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. We have a president of the United States who has said clearly and repeatedly he wants to use economic coercion to force us to give up our sovereignty. It doesn't get clearer and more threatening than that. And we have to recognize those words have been said and repeated. And so, that's why we do need to respond forcefully, strongly to that challenge. My view is Canada needs to be united, strong, and smart. We need to recognize that we have leverage and we have power in this relationship. We need to be clear with each other and with the Americans that our sovereignty is not negotiable. We need to recognize that with Donald Trump, weakness is a provocation. At every sign of weakness, he's just going to drive harder and try to take more. And we need to recognize that our best allies and our best lobbyists in all of this are Americans themselves. And that's why I have been proposing for weeks now 100% tariffs on Teslas. What we need to do is be surgical about our response. Figure out who are the Americans who are most influential with Donald Trump. Hit them very hard. Make clear we're not doing it out of any, mean streak. We're just doing it because this is a very, very dumb tariff war. And the sooner we get past it, the better. So yes, we absolutely have to target Teslas. We need to target American farmers. We've seen already that American farmers are recognizing their dependence on Canadian potash, and they don't like a U.S. tariff on our potash. We need to target their agricultural exports to us. We are the largest market for the United States, and not just by a little bit. The U.S. exports to Canada more than it does to China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. So one Canadian Prime Minister standing by herself has more power to cause pain, targeted surgical pain in the United States than the leaders of those four big countries of China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. We need to use that strength and we need to be determined. We need to have fortitude. I think we're already seeing President Trump blinking. Right? He threatens and then he pulls back.
For sure.
He threatens, he pulls back. A strong position from Canada is absolutely necessary. It has to continue. And we need to be clear with the Americans that we're not going to tolerate this kind of uncertainty. We're not going to tolerate a new threat every day. What we need, if they want a stable relationship with Canada, which is in their interests, then We need stability from them. And Ryan, I achieved that last time. Remember, last time Trump was president, he threatened, he yelled, he screamed, he hollered. Many insults were directed at Canada and Canadians. He even imposed tariffs on us. But we ended up with a trade deal that President Trump himself said was the best deal ever. And we ended with the Americans unilaterally lifting the tariffs on our steel and aluminum. That will happen again if I am prime minister and I lead an effort which is united, strong, and smart.
We've got a couple of more questions for you. I know your time's tight, but I mean, obviously, I feel like I don't even have to ask you if what happened in the Oval Office with J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is the wildest thing you've ever seen. It feels like the wildest thing diplomacy-wise that anybody has ever seen, at least in the Oval Office. But it's got people talking about banning the United States from the G7 in the Kananaskis country in Canada this year. It's got people talking about a NATO without the United States. It's put into great doubt the future of Ukraine and its war against Russian aggression. The United States, I don't have to tell you, pulling back military support and the like. I mean, what does the future of Canada and the EU look like? Canada and NATO, Canada and Ukraine, as best as you can assess right now, and in particular with you leading the Liberals?
Okay. A million specific questions and a really big issue.
Yeah.
So let me say a couple of really specific things. As Prime Minister, I would invite President Zelensky to Canada, to Kananaskis for the G7 meeting. Very important for us to show our support for Ukraine and to give our allies a chance to join us in their support for Ukraine. Ukraine is the battle lines. It's the front line right now in the fight between democracy and dictatorship for the whole world. And Ukraine right now is fighting for its sovereignty, but it's also fighting to assert the idea that just because you're bigger than your neighbor and you have a bigger army, you're not allowed to invade them and take over their territory. And I think that principle has renewed significance for Canada. So it's important for our security for Ukraine to win. I also, as Prime Minister, would invite King Charles to come to the G7 meeting in Kananaskis. I think that it is important for us to be getting more support from our historic allies. I'd like to see more support from the UK, more support from France, more support from the EU for Canada. And they need us too. Canada has been a great partner for Europe in many areas. I concluded a trade deal with Europe, CETA. That is a closer trading relationship than the one we have with the United States. And we have been supporting Ukraine, which is so important for Europe, directly touching their security. We've been training Ukrainian troops since 2015. And we need to say to the Europeans, now is the time to build an even closer security partnership directly with them. I am concerned about the security of our north, of the Arctic, and I would like to see closer cooperation between Canada and our NATO partners in Europe, including the nuclear powers in Europe, France, and the UK, and working more closely with our Nordic partners. Remember, Denmark is having its sovereignty challenged as well. We need to work together to secure our Canadian Arctic with our military allies.
Let me ask you this in closing. ECOS polling wrapped up March 5th. Shows that the Liberals, for the first time in 4 years, have 40% support across the country. This is a dramatic turnaround. This is obviously not an election. This is polling. But this is the most recent numbers that we see. The Conservatives trailing slightly at 36%, the NDP at 13%. If you win this leadership race, are you calling an election like Tuesday morning?
Not necessarily. And I'm going to say something that is going to kind of surprise you, Ryan. When I win the leadership race, I'm going to be focused on what I've said to Canadians I'm focused on in running for the leadership. And that is recognizing that this is a critical moment for Canada, an existential moment. And Canada needs a leader who is laser focused on standing for Canada and fighting for Canada. So what I would do as leader is immediately convene a meeting of the premiers of the provinces and territories, immediately meet with business leaders across the country, immediately meet with union leaders across the country. And I would say to them, we are facing the greatest threat our country has faced since the Second World War, maybe since Confederation. Do you want me to govern and lead, taking a national unity approach, lead a Canadian government that can negotiate with the Americans and can get us to a stable place? I've been elected 4 times. I've faced Canadian voters. I have a Democratic mandate. I have a seat in Parliament. I uniquely, among the leadership candidates right now, could lead that kind of an effort. And I will ask Canadians, Canadian leaders across the country, do they want me to do that? If they say, you know what, we really don't need a general election right now, we need a stable government that can speak for Canada and fight for Canada, that's the approach that I will take. And, uniquely, as someone who's an MP, as someone who can stand up immediately in the House of Commons and seek to command the confidence of the House, I'm the leader who could do that.
I want to thank you for your time. In closing, right after we wrap up this interview, we're going to be, we roll out our Real Talk Roundtable. It's a weekly gathering. We get candid. We keep it real. And we're going to be talking to 3 people who were there on March 3rd, 2005, when Canada experienced its deadliest officer-involved shooting near Mayerthorpe, Alberta. You weren't in politics then. You were working as a journalist then. What do you remember about March 3rd, 2005? And how would you assess where we're at as a nation 20 years later?
I heard you in the introduction saying that you were going to talk about that. And I'm just really grateful to you for taking the time, for reminding us, for having that commemorative moment. And I will say to everyone who wears a uniform in Canada today, whether it is the RCMP, or you are a police officer, or you are one of the brave Canadian women and men in uniform who serve the Canadian Armed Forces. I think all of us right now, as our sovereignty is being directly challenged, we recognize more than ever how much we need you. We recognize the value of your service. So I want to say to all of you, and maybe especially to our brave RCMP officers, thank you so much for your service. You really, really matter. And Canadians know it, and Canadians are grateful. I'm a grateful Canadian.
Chrystia Freeland, candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada to become the next Prime Minister of Canada. It's an office she has been very close to for years. We appreciate you talking to us today.
Thanks a lot. And get accredited to vote today. Vote by Sunday.
You got it.
Every vote counts.
You got it. That's Chrystia Freeland, who, by the way, we didn't even talk about her Alberta roots. Not a lot of people talk about Chrystia Freeland's roots in Alberta. Pretty interesting. This could be a showdown. You get, if she wins the leadership, she's saying when she wins the leadership, but if she wins the leadership, is anybody really talking about the fact that the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, grew up in Calgary? And then the 2 front runners in this Liberal leadership race, Chrystia Freeland growing up in rural Alberta, Mark Carney growing up in Edmonton. Pretty interesting stuff. Probably don't need to tell this audience. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, obviously, an Albertan. Just saying.
The Battle of the West.
I'm just saying. You can let us know what you think about this. We got a lot of comments in a Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power. A lot of you musing about, there's some folks here that are talking about participating in that vote. You've become, or you already were, members of the Liberal Party of Canada. Maybe you've joined to vote in this race. We got an email from Real Talker Michael the other day who was talking about that. He says, I joined for the first time just to participate in this race. Talking about Mark Carney versus Chrystia Freeland. Freeland's gone on the record in an interview. I mean, we had limited time with her, right? Pretty much 5 or 6 questions. We could get into deep dives. I see some of you less wanted to ask about disability benefits. A lot of you have questions about the economy, about Alberta leaving Canada. I mean, there's a million things we could get to. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, this really is, and I think in large part what's influencing those trends, those polls, like wasn't that interesting, that poll to take a look at? The Liberals for the first time polling over 40% for the first time in 4 years. That's a big deal. And you'd have to be encouraged if you're a member of the Liberal Party. That doesn't guarantee an election win, by the way. If you actually look at how that would probably realistically play out, it looks like the Liberals might be inching closer back to competing against the Conservatives, right? My gut tells me if an election was held right now, boy, would that be a tight race. And we'd want to be paying attention to specific ridings. Like if we had 45 minutes with Chrystia Freeland, I would have loved to ask her, does she think that the Alberta Liberals, or the Liberals in Alberta rather, can hold the 2 seats they've got? They've got George Chahal, former councillor down in Calgary. You got Randy Boissonneau, who've had some, what do you want to call it? Generously, some embattled moments over the last while in his career. He's still fighting. He wants to stay there. Can they hold Edmonton Centre? Wouldn't this be interesting? Freeland's gone on the record saying that, if she wins, she'd love for Mark Carney to be her finance minister. You wonder if he might trade the favor in that situation, if both of them would run again. Lots to talk about. Let us know what you think to talk at ryanjesperson.com. Our Real Talk Roundtable in just a moment. First, I want to let you know, and I want to put this on your radar. Albertans are very proud to have a world-class university right here in our home city of Edmonton, delivering great education to students and contributing, quite frankly, critical research around the world. And that's why they're asking you to help protect teaching and research at the U of A by sending a letter to the Premier, Danielle Smith, to the Advanced Education Minister, the chair of the U of A Board of Governors today. The U of A's academic staff are at the heart of the teaching and research that make the university great, but massive provincial cuts are putting that at risk. And leadership at the U of A just, quite frankly, isn't investing in frontline learning. That's why we're asking you to go check out supportthespark.ca and have your voice heard. I want to put this number in front of you, Real Talkers. When we started talking about this on the show, they had like 60 letters that have been submitted. They've got about 1,200 of them now, but they're hoping to get over 1,500 letters before this campaign wraps up. That means a few hundred of you need to take action right now. That's supportthespark.ca. This is a message from the Association of Academic Staff of the University of Alberta. What an honor yesterday, Janey. I told you I spent my entire afternoon at UCAN Youth Services, hanging out with their team, with their caseworkers, with the youth that are participating in their programs, in particular in these Ready for Work programs. It is amazing what they're doing. You can check it all out at ucan.ca, the Verto project in particular. These are young people. Verto, by the way, Latin for turnaround or for change. It's a 20-week pre-employment program that helps young people 18 to 24 transition out of harm's way, back into school or into the workforce. I had a chance to shake hands with some of these young people, to talk to them about their involvement. It's amazing. They have posters up on the wall. They get like a gold circle by their name every job interview they go to, and then when they get a job, they get to cross it all off, and they get to go ring a bell in the front office of UCAN, and everybody comes out and cheers, and it is amazing. And then there's the flip side, which is, where would they be without this? You can learn more about donating to UCAN and their comedy nights coming up later this month in March at ucan.ca. Our friends at North Road Investment Council know that everybody's watching the markets right now. You're paying attention. What do the numbers say about your family's wealth? I want to talk to you about securing your financial future with North Road Investment Council. Whether you're planning for retirement, growing your wealth, or navigating complex markets, North Road Investment Council's team of experts crafts personalized strategies for investing, financial planning, insurance, and this is the best part, I think, the digital risk advisory. Nobody else in the space is doing that. You can learn more on their website, northroadic.com. A steady hand and a studied voice. And I want to reiterate how proud we are to do business with California Closets of Canada. We've been talking to you about these guys for a long time, about the custom craftsmanship, about the work they can do on budget for any space, guaranteed for life. But right now, I want to focus on the fact that this is a Canadian company. It is owned by Albertans. It is employing local folks, manufacturing all of its installations locally, and primarily sourcing materials right here in Canada. This is a locally owned Canadian company. If you're looking to get organized this spring, to turn your spot around and live somewhere you can truly be proud of, invest in your space. There's Nowhere else to go but CaliforniaClosets.ca. That's where you can request your free consultation, get your design journey started today. Johnny and I talked about this earlier this week. On Monday, the 3rd of March, the 20th anniversary of that horrific tragedy in Mayerthorpe. It's one of those moments in time where an entire nation freezes, where virtually everybody remembers where they were when they heard. It's an honor to be joined today by 3 individuals who have been living the recovery, the fallout from this event for the past 2 decades. Sergeant Grant Kneller is currently working for the Western Alberta District of the RCMP after just recently leaving the Mayerthorpe detachment. That's where he was the detachment commander for the past 5 years. He's served Albertans for more than 20 years with the RCMP, all within this province. Margaret Fraser-Thibeault was the Victims Services Coordinator at the time of the tragedy in March of 2005. She worked closely with all 4 of those officers, Brock Myrall, Peter Sheeman, Anthony Gordon, and Leo Johnston. And Margaret was also part of the group that fundraised and spearheaded the building of that beautiful memorial park in Mayerthorpe. And Janet Jabush is one of the most passionate politicians, all about community, that I guarantee you'll ever meet. She is a motorcycle riding grandma, and she is the proud mayor of Mayerthorpe. To the 3 of you, thank you for joining us as we honor the fallen 4 and celebrate their legacy. Staff Sergeant Kneller, what do you remember, or what do you remember most about March 3rd, 2005?
Well, it seemed like a long time ago, but in some ways it doesn't seem like a long time ago. I was a very junior member working in southern Alberta, about 6 hours away from where the event happened. And I remember my first staff sergeant coming out of his office. He was a very upbeat and fun guy, and the look on his face, well, that kind of told the story. We knew something terrible had happened, and we just couldn't imagine that was, what it was.
Mayor, what do you remember about that morning, March 3rd, 2005?
I remember that I had a meeting. I was a realtor at the time, and I had a meeting with another realtor to preview a house for a client. Was on my way driving from Whitecourt to Mayerthorpe, and because I lived in Whitecourt at the time, and I heard some of what was going on the news, and I was passed by cars, RCMP vehicles with their sirens on. So I knew something was going down, didn't know exactly what it was, heard there was an incident northeast of Mayerthorpe. And when I got into town and talked to the realtor that I was meeting, he said, "Oh yeah, this guy's known to the RCMP here in town, probably just another, incident, quote unquote, involving this guy." And it wasn't until a little bit later in that day that we knew the extent of the tragedy that had occurred.
Margaret, you were working with RCMP Victim Services at the time in Mayerthorpe. You personally knew and worked with all 4 of these officers.
Yeah. All 4 boys. I called them my boys.
Yeah. The oldest one, if I remember correctly, 31 years of age, the oldest one.
Yeah. That's
that was Leo, right? I believe Leo was 31. What tell us about these boys.
He actually was 32.
32.
Well, just this morning I got thinking about how old they would be today.
Yeah.
Brock would be 49, Anthony would be 48, Leo would be 52, and Peter would be 45. And they should have been able to be that age. However, each of them had their own unique personalities, and Brock was brand new. He had, I think his first day was February 14th. And I said, they moved in across the street, him and Angie, and I said, "Oh, don't worry about unpacking. We'll help you tomorrow. But tonight you need to get your red serge out," and because it was a 50s night. And the RCMP were going to serve all kinds of 50s milkshakes and all those things in the red serge. And Brock, they did that. They showed up and we took a picture, and it's the last picture of all of them together. He was one of those people that he set the bar high, but he took friends and family with him when he went over that bar. He just was a go-getter, and he brought everybody with him. Anthony was a sports person and a great father. He had a little boy then, and his wife was pregnant at the time. And Leo told terrible jokes, and we always said Leo no. And Leo always had a way about him that made you laugh, even though I wouldn't want to have met him when he was angry or in a dark alley if you had crossed his path. Peter was the youngest, but he had the most service. And he was such a good person. He just was good from the inside out. And if you knew his family now, you could see why that was.
His dad's a minister, isn't he?
Yeah, his dad, yes, Don
Yeah.
Sheeman.
Yeah.
And they he had his faith, and he knew where he was going, when he died, but he didn't expect to die for another, well, if he was 25, another 25, 35, 40 years. And that should have been the way it was. However, it wasn't. Life had other tragedies. And so, yeah, they all had their own unique personalities, and they were all, and I'm not saying it just because they died. I'm saying it because they were such an asset to the RCMP, to the community, to friends. They were just really good people.
I want to thank you for giving us this personal insight into these four. Margaret, how long did it take you to be able to talk about them with a smile on your face? Talk to us about your journey.
Oh my gosh. I was in the office when it happened, and I heard over the radio that shots had been fired. But I made myself believe that, well, they were trained, they were great marksmen and everything else. And it wouldn't have been as bad as we expected, but it was that bad. And so I think one of the things that helped me was because I was in victim services, I wasn't very smart about my own grief, but there were people around who I wanted to be there for. And right down to the new officers, the ones who came in to help out, to take the calls and everything for quite a while after. They had never been some of them had never been in a rural detachment, didn't know how to read the map. So that was, I can do that. Like you just feel like you have this responsibility. Like I said, I wasn't that smart about all this, but because I'd never been in this situation before. But with the advocates that I had, we all went, okay, one person, one time, one issue. And that's how we got through it all. I think the first time that I was able to really smile about it was oddly thinking of Leo's dumb jokes and telling people his jokes. And as I gave tours, see, I had to take a break at 3 months and then came back, but I realized I wasn't going to come back to the level I needed to be at for my clients, for our clients with victim services. And so I had to hand in my resignation, which was done very, very sadly. And I cried for about a month. And then I realized that if you don't have your sense of humor, you're not going to make it back again. You have to have a sense of humor to begin your journey back to some kind of sense of normalcy, although there's those who would say, I was never normal, so we didn't know what that was. But to answer your question, I don't know how long it took me to be able to smile, because it was mixed in with crying and with all the other things that are involved in grief. And yeah, and now when I think of my boys, of course I smile. But at the 20th anniversary, I choked up again when I heard Don Sheeman's speech about his son and his three friends who had died. I choked up because it was so well said. And in the 4 CF-18s flying over, well, that did me in because there's 4 of them.
Yeah.
And because it was such a salute, such a tribute to our boys, that choked me up. So I don't know. I'm rambling.
No, you're not, Margaret. You're not rambling. You're making a huge impact on this audience right now. I can tell you that. JJ's watching us on YouTube right now, live on our chat powered by Park Power. Says, "Boy, is Margaret ever remembering them well and remembering them with all her heart." Please thank Margaret for sharing like this. I love that you're calling them your boys. JJ went on to say, "I remember that day well. Even though I was living provinces away at the time, the loss was so deep and profound for Alberta and for all of Canada." Staff Sergeant, what sort of an impact is this? I mean, I guess in policing, you understand, we lost a couple of constables, EPS constables, Brett Ryan and Travis Jordan a short time ago, coming up on 2 years ago in Edmonton. And I remember, part of what struck me is EPS members absolutely devastated by it. And also EPS members with grim faces, securing the crime scene, participating in the investigation, continuing to enforce the law around the city and in the region, despite the fact that 2 of their colleagues had just been murdered. I hate to say the risk comes with the territory, but in policing, it's like kind of being in the military. It's a different calling. You got to wrap your mind around what you do a little bit differently. How did it impact, K Division? How did it impact RCMP officers across the country then? And does it continue to make an impact today?
Well, I think what you said was very much correct, Ryan. As police officers, and I don't think it's RCMP specific. I don't think it's Edmonton Police specific. I think it's any police officer. We all are trained to understand that this is a possibility that could happen, but at the same time, I don't think everybody really believes it's going to happen. So when it happens, it's still a huge emotional time. I myself couldn't have imagined being, at that detachment, or trying to go there to help with my level of service then. Maybe it's a little different now. I'm a little older and a little more rigid, but there's nothing that can prepare you for that. I mean, if you look around your office or your place of work, wherever that might be, and you think you take 4 random people and just say to yourself, tomorrow those people don't exist anymore. I don't think that even gets close to how that feeling was being felt by everybody in that detachment and the community.
Yeah. We got an email from a member, John Kirkman, and John actually joined me in studio. I encourage people to check out that interview. It was back on March 17th of 2023. So coming up on a couple of years ago. You can find it on our YouTube channel in our podcast archives. John's career actually has taken him into some really tragic territory. He's lost colleagues in Mayerthorpe, Wetaskiwin, and St. Albert. And he talks to us about that in that interview. He knew that the 3 of you were coming on today, and he sent me an email. And I wanted to read it to you and get your thoughts. He says, March 3rd, 2005, an incredibly complex day for me. The profound sense of loss and confusion does fade over time, he says, but it never goes away. It comes back. When I think of the shattered lives of their families, their friends, their colleagues, the pain they must feel to this day, unimaginable. And he says, and it comes back when I think of the futures cut short. Margaret, like you were talking about how old they'd be today. He says the limitless potential of those 4 who were lost. It's a day that not only saw the loss of 4 heroes, but it wreaked emotional carnage and devastation to a community, to a province, and to a country. But it was also a turning point in my life, says John, which is why it's so complex. He says, as you may remember, I was deep in the application process to join the RCMP when this happened. Peter and Leo were 2 of my character references. He says, I remember it like it was yesterday. Peter calling me and telling me all about the call that he had just had with the recruiter, how excited he was because he thought it went really well. and at the prospect of me joining the organization. I'd be lying if I said I didn't consider withdrawing my application after March 3rd, but it just didn't sit right with me. He says, of course, there was fear with such a stark example of the enormous risk faced in the job, but as I sat with it, my sense of duty and loyalty to the four who were lost, my community, my country, was galvanized rather than broken. I realized that there is evil in this world, and the thought of shrinking away from it or hiding from it became completely unimaginable and unacceptable to me. So I completed my training, I joined the RCMP, and have a career where I hope I made an impact for the greater good in at least some small way. He says, mine is just one of a million stories of people impacted by this tragedy. On days and weeks like this, I mourn for the four we lost and everyone who still suffers from it. You will never be forgotten. That from John Kirkman. That's incredible stuff, Mayor.
It is indeed, sir. It is indeed. And he's not wrong. The impact was felt not only in this tiny community of Mayerthorpe, but across the country and indeed across the world. When the service for those fellows was held at the Butter Dome in Edmonton, there were people from all over the world there, law enforcement.
And some of them had paid their own ways to get there because their detachment either didn't have the money or didn't have the resources or whatever, but some of them paid their own way to be there to honor our four boys.
Grant, I don't know if I'm not sure if how you can speak on behalf of recruiting and that sort of a thing, but interesting to hear from John. That's one member who says, he considered withdrawing his application, but he knew he wouldn't. I've got a dear friend of mine who joined the American Armed Forces after 9/11 because of that, and served 2 tours, as a matter of fact, in Iraq. It drew him into it in service of his country. I can imagine for a lot of other people that would be the ultimate turnoff. No way I'm going to put myself in the line of fire like that. How did that impact the force on recruiting, retention, and the like?
Well, I'm not sure if I can speak on that. I just don't know that part of the story, but I can tell you the word galvanizing is a word that really jumped out from that email that you read. And so a good friend of mine was at depot when this happened, and he had called me that night, and basically, we talked about what happened, and he said, I've never wanted to be here more than I do right now. So I think that word galvanizing, that's really a word that's jumped out for me. And I think when you're in this profession, that is one of those words or those feelings that you get at times like this is we have to push on, if not just to get the job done, but in honor of these members that, were lost trying to accomplish what they were accomplishing. We have to finish it for them. So that word galvanizing, that was a powerful word. That's going to stick with me for the rest of the day for sure.
I want to ask each of you about this, but Mayor, I'll start with you. And I don't quite know how to ask the question except to point out the obvious, which is for most Canadians, when they hear the name Mayerthorpe, this is what they think of. And our podcast listeners won't see what your face just did when I made that point, but your eyes kind of sunk. Can we talk about it and the impact that something like this has on the identity, even the reputation of a community?
We absolutely can. That's a question I've been asked a lot over the last couple of weeks, Ryan. And you're right. I did a piece for CBC a little while ago, and I spoke about that very thing. You say the name Mayerthorpe and people will pause because they're searching in their archives for the relationship.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, oh, that's the place where those 4 cops were killed. And like I said in that interview, I try to stop myself, but sometimes I'll roll my eyes, and then I have to go on and explain that Mayerthorpe is so much more than just that place where those cops were killed. It's a vibrant little community full of volunteers and people who, in times of unimaginable tragedy and grief, like March 3rd, 2005, will stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder, and hold each other up and support each other, and all of those wonderful things that you expect from a small town. there's a lot of talk right now about the upcoming municipal election this fall, and people have asked me if I'm going to run, and I disclosed a long time ago that my intention is to seek a third term on council and a second full term as Mayerthorpe's mayor. And they asked me why, and galvanized is, you've used that word, and the ceremony on Monday galvanized something else in my brain. I've got some goals in my next term on council, but the one that's now risen to the top of the list is to find a different legacy for the town of Mayerthorpe, because right now the legacy that sits with everybody for this little town is what happened on March 3rd in 2005. So my goal in a third 4-year term on council is going to be to do whatever I can, however I can, to create a new legacy for that little town, because I think it deserves that.
I think you're right. Can you give us a general sense or an idea of what that might look like, or what the path might look like to get there?
It's going to be a lot of hard work, and my suspicion is it's going to involve a lot of socioeconomic kind of synergies, because small towns face all kinds of challenges. I guess the one thing that we do have in our favor in the town of Mayerthorpe is that we sit right along the second busiest highway in the province of Alberta. That's Highway 43. We see somewhere between 17 and 20,000 vehicles a day. So if we could create a must-see kind of a stop along the highway if you're traveling to northwestern Alberta or northeastern BC, if we could create that kind of must-see, must-stop sort of an attraction, maybe that's what we need to do. I think it's gonna be a lot of hard work for sure, Ryan, but I feel like I'm up to the challenge.
I love it.
Can I just add to that, Ryan?
Absolutely.
One of the things we do have right now is the park. When this happened, a group of people got together and said, listen, we have to have something to honor those 4 guys, because it can't just be, Mayerthorpe's where those 4 guys were shot. So we built the park, Living Legacy, and we thought it carefully, and it was ways for people to deal with their grief also. See that we're going to turn this into something else. And we refused to be defined or defeated at that time. We knew that's what people would think, and that's natural, it's normal thinking. But we put things in the park, the circle, the guys are in a circle because we had the Alexis Sioux Nation first, Alexis Dakota Sioux Nation, sorry, within this detachment. So we did the circle as their belief in the circle of life, and life doesn't end. And we put the guys in 4 different directions because the RCMP will, we hope forever, but police will forever be protecting all 4 corners of the world, of our world, of Canada. And we needed to do that because to us, the fabric of Canada was torn that day. What do we do now? What do we do? So we'll build the park. Okay, and each of them has a different stance because yes, there were 4 guys, there are fallen 4, but there were individuals, and we wanted to recognize that. So they are in the directions for a reason, where they were born or where they served. And the trees. We put trees in there because if the roots are deep, a tree can withstand a storm, same as people. And the flowers, that given time, beauty will return. And the grass, because nature is the place you go to get some peace with your grief. And, there's many other things in there that were thought out, and they're there for a reason. And they did help people with their grief. And we still have many people stopping to see, where is this park? And I give quite a few tours, and the library people, thank God for them. Jesse gives tours also when groups show up. And these people go back knowing that we've done what we could to change it to something beautiful. to change it to something strong, but all the while honoring our four guys with dignity. So we have a park.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I want to remind our audience, Margaret, that you were part of the group that fundraised and ensured that park was built. And Grant, you were one of those that organized that 20th anniversary memorial event at the park. I want to ask the three of you, I'm telling you this ahead of time because I want to give you a second to think about it. Before we wrap, I want to ask you what legacy looks like, how you define legacy, how these four names of these men are remembered in this community and how they continue to make an impact to this day beyond the statues in that beautiful park. But I do want to ask you, Staff Sergeant, on the policing front. There was a fatality inquiry, a fatality report. HR Skills Development Canada completed a workplace safety investigation released in 2007 following these four murders and the subsequent suicide of the gunman. And there were 8 recommendations made, centering in particular around body armor, around radio capabilities, night vision for RCMP members working at night, threat assessments conducted by behavioral sciences groups, described as integral and important for public and officer safety, as well as the maintenance of operational intelligence files. Can we look at this tragedy on March 3rd, 2005 and say without a doubt that it changed policing? Police resources have improved, that officers are more safe at work and off the job. As we remember, Peter Sheeman wasn't even on duty when this happened, since this tragedy?
I very much think you can, Ryan. And from all those things that you mentioned, those are all things that we do now. When I look back to, when I was on duty that day when that happened, and I just look around inside my police vehicle, what equipment I had as a resource for me compared to what I have now. I mean, a lot of that is just technology advancing and technology moves at the speed of light nowadays, but the things that we did not have 20 years ago compared to what we have now, and I'm speaking for all police officers, like, again, whether it's RCMP, whether it's, a city police force, a small town police force, like we all have such an abundance of better and new technologies to assist us that I think back 20 years ago, I'm like, I don't know sometimes how we did it and how this hadn't happened before. But again, 20 years ago, we lived in a different kind of world. A lot can change in a few years. I mean, Ryan, I guess you're a perfect example of that. It wasn't too many years ago that you were sitting in a big studio somewhere working for somebody else. And
that's right.
Here we are with progress, and we're talking basically on my cell phone to people anywhere that want to watch. So
unimaginable. Yeah, I shared with the audience on Monday, but I remember when I heard about this, I'd worked a morning radio shift in Red Deer, and I'd headed home for the day, and I got a call from my assignment from my news director that was like, you need to come back in. And Janet, my experience somewhat the same as yours, as I was sort of nearby, adjacent to the QE2 highway on my way to go back into the radio studio, and it was RCMP squad cars, SUVs, the kind of, what do you call them, a staff sergeant? They're not SWAT, but whatever you call them with the RCMP.
Emergency response team.
The ERTs, like just one ERT, after the other, after the other, after the other, and you just had this pit in your stomach. 20 years later, here we are, and as we wrap this conversation, the roundtables are on Friday for a reason. We send this audience into the weekend with something to think about. So I'm going to ask each of you about legacy, and this is just your personal take on it. Staff Sergeant, we'll start with you. What does legacy look like with these four?
Well, I think. Geez, that's not an easy question. I think for everybody, a legacy is maybe a little bit different, a little bit personal. I know for me, as being the detachment commander in Mayerthorpe, I wanted to ensure that every member that came to our detachment was well aware and well informed of what the history was of that incident. So I had from the park, I had purchased a stack of the books about the incident, and I made sure every one of my new members got that book. Now, whether they read it or not, I guess that's up to them. But I wanted them to be prepared with the history of this town and of the tragedy, but also to realize that is the history, that's not the now. So we do things differently. We need to think differently. And as the mayor had spoken earlier, we need to change the feeling of when you say Mayerthorpe, we need to change the feeling of what people think about that.
Yeah. Mayor, how about you? Legacy.
Yeah, like I said, and the Fallen for tragedy is always going to be attached to the story of Mayerthorpe. It's part of the ethos of the community now. I think part of the legacy, and this comes from my days as a realtor, because I was on the boots on the ground doing that job after the tragedy. And it's funny though, the first new member that transferred in to be full-time in our detachment, I went to him and I said, "Wow, what does it feel like to be posted here in Mayerthorpe?" And he looked me square in the eye and he said, "I requested to come here.
Wow.
I asked to be here." And I thought, you know what? That's the kind of dedication that put those 4 guys on that farm that day. It's the kind of dedication, oh, here I go. It's the kind of dedication that continues to serve the RCMP with folks like Staff Sergeant Kneller and the other guys that continue to join and serve. But for Mayerthorpe, changing the narrative about what my little town is all about. Again, Margaret is very, very correct that park is a wonderful place to honor those who serve, and specifically those 4 fellows that died on March 3rd, 2025. But come see the park, definitely, because it's part of our heritage now. And let's find some other things for them to enjoy while they're in Mayerthorpe.
100%.
The legacy is going to be there forever about those 4 guys. But I want to change the first thought that people have when they hear the name Mayerthorpe.
Yeah, members of my family, my wife's parents live just outside Humboldt, and it's like with you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Listen, Margaret, you just and I guarantee as people are listening to this, they have that same reaction, and we will never forget. That's another moment in Canada where you remember where you were. I was bowling when we heard. And you just will never forget. And I see it, like we're out, we pass through Humboldt 5-6 times a year, and you still see sticks out, and you still see the odd ribbon and things like that. But also, and it's like I don't speak on behalf of any families. I don't speak on behalf of anyone, I'm just saying my personal experience and my personal observation is that something like that, when you say Humboldt, and before that, maybe it was Swift Current, they experienced their own disaster with their team bus. That's kind of what people think of with that town. And on one hand, it ensures that Canadians shower love upon that town and show love to that town. But at the same time, I would imagine if that's your everyday and you're living there every day, it's very difficult to have a daily reminder of something horrific and still try to have a somewhat normal rest of your life. And I would imagine that for each and every person, that journey looks a little bit different. Margaret, you've just done such a beautiful job of expressing yourself today. Let me give the last word to you on legacy.
Well, I've been thinking about it, and that's a tough question, Ryan, as you know. But a legacy comes from what you do for others, not what you do for yourself. And I think that's where the RCMP legacy of these 4 guys and all other RCMP is what they did for others, what they did for the community, whatever community they lived in, what they did for us to feel safe, and how we could be friends with them but still pay attention to the law. That's their legacy. And these 4 guys, their legacy got cut short, so they have a different legacy. Their legacy is that they gave their lives in honor of the uniform. And a legacy is a different thing to everybody. But I do think it has to come from inside you to decide what you're going to do outside for the community, for others. That's what I think a legacy is. And not to be a salesperson, but I am. We brought these coins out. Oh, you took it off right away.
No.
We bought these coins for the 20th anniversary. We started selling them on March 3rd.
Yeah.
And we had 500 of them. And well over half are gone already, because the RCMP in particular collect coins that mean something. They represent something. And so we got these coins. So
Margaret, where can people get those?
they can phone me, 780-305-8800. Or they can.
That is the first time anyone has ever given their phone number out on
I
Real
don't
Talk.
care.
I don't know
I
if you
don't
realize what you just did, but
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do very much so.
Okay.
Because they can phone there to order them, or they can stop at phone any RCMP detachment and see if they know, because a lot of detachments took some with them
Yeah.
to sell within their own detachments. Or you can email me. Can I give my email
Of course
address?
you can, my friend.
FPTHIB, I can't even remember. FPTHIB at tellus.net.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll punch that. I can't believe I'm doing this. I will punch your phone number and your email. I've been a journalist. I've been a talk show host for 20 years. I've never done this. I will put your personal contact information in the show notes if people want to. Are those called challenge coins? Is that what you call those?
That's the challenge coins. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're different on each side.
They're beautiful.
This is the same coin. Whoops.
Yeah. Here, we'll put you full screen so we can. You hold them right up
Okay.
to your camera, and then we'll be able to see them. Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. They're beautiful.
That's
They're beautiful.
one side, and this is the other side.
Yeah, okay.
Hang on.
All right. That is Margaret Fraser-Thibeault. We'll put your contact information in the show notes. Staff Sergeant Grant Kneller, RCMP, and the Mayor of Mayerthorpe, Janet Jabush. To the three of you, I knew this is a tough assignment. I know that it's heavy lifting. I know that it's been obviously a big week for you. I want to reference and mention as well and show love to the Myrol, Sheeman, Gordon, and Johnston families. I'm thinking of them. I'll never forget an interview I did with Keith Myrol shortly after his son passed, and just the pain on a father's face. I covered those funerals as a journalist. It's one of the most, it just burned itself into my brain. I know I speak as my experience, and there are millions of Canadians that have their own stories too. But thank you to the three of you for honoring and remembering the fallen for today. Margaret, talk to us real quick as we wrap about your book. Yeah, no, you've written a book. Tell us about I'm okay until I'm not okay.
Until I'm not okay. Grief from A to Z. I wanted to write the book after the guys died, but it was too fresh, too soon, I didn't know how I was going to approach it, because I didn't want to expose any confidentialities. So I did find a way to do it. And that was because of my husband. My husband died 6 years ago. And after he died, I thought he was always after me to write this book about grief. And because I was in victim services for 12 or 13 years and dealt with a lot of grief, I thought, you know what? Psychologists and psychiatrists know more than me, but I've seen more than them. And so I wrote it, and I dedicated it to my husband, because once he died, I suddenly realized how I was going to do this book, how I was going to approach it. And so you can get it through Amazon.
Beautiful. We'll put the link to that in the show notes as well, Margaret.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, happy to do it, obviously. Thank you to the three of you. Much love to you. Our live chat's exploding right now. People just really talking about how grateful they are for you, the three of you, sharing your thoughts. Thanks for doing this.
And Ryan, you are exceptional in what you deal with across this province, across the country. You're a smart guy about what's going on, about, with common sense. Where did the common sense go? Yeah, and you're very good at that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Margaret. I appreciate that. That means a lot. That's Margaret Fraser-Thibeault, Staff Sergeant Grant Kneller, and Mayor Janet Jabush joining us. Real Talkers, we want to know what you think about what you just heard. I want to thank everybody that's sharing their thoughts here on the live chat. Ben says, Demon Hunter says, March 3rd, 05, difficult time for me, having grown up an hour away, just outside Drayton Valley for 15 years. He says, a small town, a small community, but giant hearts. Absolutely. Vamp Fashion says, classy of Real Talk to do a respectful segment on this tragedy. To be honest with you, Vamp, I talked to Mayor Jabush about this. I think it was in like November, something like that. And so we've been, I wouldn't say looking forward to this, but this has been a priority for us as well. Alberta Ganger letting us know that folks in Bathurst, New Brunswick are still maintaining the memorial of the basketball team that was killed nearly 2 decades ago as well. I remember as a Calgary kid growing up, never forget my dad driving me on our way in the Oldsmobile 98 on our way to high school, Johnny, one morning. I think it was going to I would have been in my grade 11 year.
Is it the wood paneling? Is that
no,
what that
it didn't have the wood. It was all black, but that Oldsmobile, that was some of the most special times, just driving with Dad, him giving me a ride to school on his way to the hospital or to the office. And you just drive, you just knew something was wrong. Driving down Deerfoot Trail, South Deerfoot, coming up to the, where the Southland exit is for folks know in Calgary. And there were squad cars everywhere, and there was police tape, and there was just something had gone obviously horribly wrong. And people may remember, this is early 1990s, Constable Richard Sonnenberg. There was a young man that had stolen a vehicle and had led police on a chase, and that chase had made its way onto Deerfoot Trail, basically the freeway through Calgary. And Constable Sonnenberg was trying to run a spike belt across the Deerfoot to stop the car. And the car, we don't need to get too into it, but either swerved to hit him or swerved to try to get around the spike belt. And obviously Constable Sonnenberg was fatally injured that day. And his memorial right there on the southbound ramp coming off Southland onto Deerfoot was maintained up until a very short time ago. And actually, I should do some research to find out what happened to it. But there was a small kind of a stone installation there. And then for years and years and years, maybe some Calgary Real Talkers can let me know what happened here. But for years and years and years, folks would show up and they would mow a heart around that stone, that memorial stone, in honor of Constable Sonnenberg. And I just noticed up until a short time ago, and now it doesn't appear to be there anymore. But it's one of those things, like Alberta Ganger's talking about, those memorials, those installations can go a long way with the community. But also interesting to talk about how a community's identity evolves as well, isn't it? We welcome your thoughts on this, Real Talkers. I know most of you will probably hear this through the weekend. Let us know what you think. It doesn't have to be the week of the anniversary for us to continue to reflect on these types of things. And I want to thank all of you in advance that take the time to comment on it. I want to give you an update on something there's a story flying under the radar on the Alberta political landscape. And my spidey senses tell me that this story is not going to fly under the radar much longer. I'm expecting something big soon. And I want to get to that. And then we have, as you can imagine, this week, the Flamethrower is just top shelf, presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. I want to let you know, we talk about Alberta. We talk about community. Nobody knows Alberta community better than Freeland Brothers. They're celebrating their 70th anniversary this year. 70 years since Frank Loveson opened up that butcher shop in Hinton, Alberta. Now they got 16 locations across the province serving Albertans. They know that family time around the dinner table, nothing beats that. They've got a 20% off meat sale happening Monday, March 17th. That's the St. Patty's meat sale. One day only. You can get the details on their website, and make sure you circle the first of the month. The next one will be the 1st of April. Coming up, every single Freeland Brothers knocking 15% off grocery purchases of $75 or more. Freeland Brothers is proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Bertrand Bickersteth, what an interview this week. Hey, talking about Black history in Alberta, in particular his work on Black cowboys in Alberta. Have you ever thought, I really did not think twice about the word cowboy until Bertrand started talking about it. If you missed that interview with him, you absolutely must check it out earlier this week. Bertrand is the 2024-25 writer-in-residence for Athabasca University. I know a lot of people, when they think Athabasca, they think online learning, and for good reason. Obviously, tens of thousands of Canadians have pursued their post-secondary dreams at AU because it's removed all the barriers. It's an online university. Your only commute is to your device. But what a lot of people don't talk about is things like what Bertrand is doing there, the research that happens at Athabasca University. They're driven by a strong commitment to empower learners worldwide. You can learn more about the AU Advantage by visiting their website, athabascau.ca. Our friends at Complete Care Restoration are ready to help you out in case of emergency. And this is getting personal for me this week. I talked to you about this. We're dealing with black mold right now. What a pain in the butt. It could be asbestos for you. Maybe you found it as part of what you thought was going to be a small home renovation project. Maybe it's a burst pipe. Maybe it's a sewer backup. I feel your pain in that circumstance. They're working in communities impacted by wildfire right now. They do it all. They've been doing it for 25 years, restoring property, rebuilding peace of mind. Do not wait for the damage to get even worse. heaven forbid, if disaster strikes, remember the name Complete Care Restoration. And our friends at Kubi Energy want us to remind you that they are literally always hiring. Always. If you're interested in working in their beautiful locations, they've got headquarters in Calgary and Edmonton. They've got awesome shops in Kamloops and Lethbridge. They're covering Western Canada there as the busiest solar installer in the West. And that means that they're looking for electricians. They're looking for apprentices. They're looking for salespeople. They're looking for engineers. They're looking for office managers. If you want to be part of creating sustainable energy systems with solar power, carbon offsets, and utility solutions, start your journey today at kubi.ca. So this is a story, before we get to the flamethrower, I wanted to talk about this real quick, and the fallout of the Alberta budget. And I know that, everybody's got sort of a different take on the value of that budget or what it brings to the table. We've heard from a lot of you real talkers that just, you're feeling like rural Alberta was ignored. In particular, I've heard from a good number of you that think it's a mistake for the province to be number one, making good on a promise to cut personal income taxes. Danielle Smith said that was a priority. She told us as much her last time here on the show, but of course they're borrowing to do it. Some of you don't think that's the right move. Others don't think that the province should be spending about $100 million right now helping the city of Edmonton rid itself of that old Coliseum problem, spending millions and millions to tear down the Coliseum while some secondary highways, heck, some busier highways than that across the province are crumbling right now. And you have to assume that's what fired up the MLA, the conservative MLA out of Slave Lake. That's Scott Sinclair. We talked to you about his post, released it on his personal Facebook on the 1st of March. So just a short time, a couple of days after the budget was out. And I want to remind you again, I know I'm saying it a lot, Johnny, but this is not an opposition MLA. This is a government MLA, backbencher. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not a minister, but he's a government MLA nonetheless. He describes the budget as disappointing at best and at worst unacceptable. He says, I don't know who it's meant to serve, but it certainly isn't for me, my family, my friends, or my constituents. He goes on to talk about deficits. He goes on to talk about funding arena projects in major cities. Probably a shot at the OEG partnership in Edmonton. They're getting a ton of cash right now. But he says, what about Highway 88 in our riding? The work on that is remaining incomplete, and he's talking about closing hospitals, and you understand why. If you talk to anybody from Slave Lake, are you aware that they're driving 2.5 hours as soon as they're going into labor? They're hopping in the car to go to a bigger town, to go to a bigger city, to go have that baby. Their ORs, their ERs have been closed down at times. He says we need local maternity services back. We need to be able to perform surgeries closer to home. He talks about their wish list in High Prairie, which includes a helipad. He says healthcare in Northern Alberta has hit rock bottom. He's critical of funding for LRT projects in Calgary and Edmonton. He's pointing out that the city of Edmonton made out like bandits, by the way, in this budget, relatively speaking. Everybody thought that Mayor Sohi and Danielle Smith were at loggerheads, and maybe they still are. They're probably not like having martinis today at 4 o'clock, but Edmonton did all right. $9 million for 50 new police officers. They're getting a bunch of money for schools, etc. And I know that a bunch of people are going to write in on that. Not to say it's not a priority, but so says the MLA, Sinclair, out of Slave Lake. He says, listen, I'm a team player. He's got a long history, by the way, as a very competitive elite hockey player. He's also, by the way, the only Indigenous MLA for the UCP. He says, I'm a team player, but I was elected to stand up for our region, and right now this feels like the only option I have left, the nuclear option. My words, not his. And so we put this out there earlier this week, and I said, hey, keep an eye on this. And I've just been noticing that like mainstream media has not really been talking about it. People haven't really been buzzing about it, and that just doing something. It's doing something in my brain, and I'm sitting there going, there is no way that this guy, quite frankly, is going to get away with this. That's the cut to the chase take on this. I am blown away that there has been no public commentary on this yet from the Premier or ministers and from Sinclair himself, who has remained, relatively speaking, quite quiet through all of this. Now, I recognize that hundreds and hundreds of elected representatives, municipally, provincially, and otherwise, have been gathering in Edmonton at the Alberta Municipalities Conference, a bunch of them getting together, and the scuttlebutt there, it just feels like everybody's kind of waiting for the shoe to drop here. My gut tells me that something's going to happen here. And what that looks like, I don't know. And Real Talkers, you can let me know what your speculation is on this. I can't say I know Scott Sinclair too well personally, but my guess is, considering the posts are not deleted, he's standing by it. And my guess is if he's standing by it, I just think of how political parties work, and I'm not saying that this is exclusive to conservatives, but just if you look back, when's the last time that an elected representative, a team member in particular, a backbencher, has come out, ripped the government a new one, and lived to talk about it? But I do think that there are other factors at play here. I have to imagine that Scott Sinclair's future with the United Conservative Party could be in question. It could be in peril. But what might stand in the way of that? Well, number one, pretty tough look, whether that's a caucus vote, whether that's a directive from the premier, whatever it is. It's a tough look, number one, to, let's say, kick somebody out for being critical of a budget and standing up for their constituents. And does it add a layer when he's the only Indigenous MLA in the entire party? You tell me what you think about this. I wanted to put it back on your radar before we wrap for the week because something tells me, and sometimes I'm right, and sometimes nothing comes of my musings and speculation, but something tells me that this story is not done. As we wrap every single week, courtesy of our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, that's Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road, we ask you to send us your hottest takes. That's right, we want your flamethrower submissions. These are all real emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. And Lucky Boyd Roberts writes in, he says, here's the skinny old sport. 2 years back, I hauled the whole family out to Fort Edmonton Park on Canada Day. Wouldn't you know it, that was the second year running that the celebrations were pretty much kaput. Folks were saying we Canadians are nothing but a bunch of colonizers. There was no pride to be had, no siree. And I figured a historical spot like the fort would be just the ticket to spin the yarn of Canada's tale to my children. But lo and behold, not a single flag in sight. I was fit to be tied. Now, don't get me wrong, says Lucky. It's right as rain to own up to our country's missteps and learn a thing or two from the past, but I'll be darned if I let anyone tell me I shouldn't puff out my chest and say that I'm a proud Canadian. Now, back then, the left-wing crowd was spouting off something awful about how we're all colonizers and we ought to just hang our heads in shame. And it burned my biscuits then, and it burns my biscuits now to hear the same malarkey coming from the right-wingers. And then you've got all these MAGA types, calling Justin Trudeau a traitor and baying for his neck. They've gone and labeled liberals as cucks of all things. I ask you, says Lucky, can you think of anything more traitorous or cuckolded than a Canadian MAGA fanboy groveling, oh, Mr. Trump, please annex us and take us in? It's enough to make a fellow's stomach turn. Have a little self-respect, for Pete's sake. It's downright pitiful. Lucky Boyd Roberts says, as always, great show, Johnny and Ryan. You two are the berries, the real McCoy. Keep your noses clean and your shoes shine. That from Lucky, who I hope writes in again. How about this one from Janey, who says, listen up, you maple syrup traitors, you double-double defectors, you wannabe bald eagle enthusiasts. Have you ever heard a moose sigh in disappointment? That's what Canada does, every single one of you, when you say, I want to move to America and be the 51st state, you traitors to the toque. First of all, let's get something straight. Alberta, looking across the border at Montana, those of you that, sort of your long-lost cousin who left the farm and made it big in the city, you think Americans are going to welcome us with open arms? They're going to take one look at us and say, what do you mean free health care? And don't even get me started on your soft spot for freedom when you get salty about government regulations. Meantime, in the States, your insulin's $500, your tap water's flammable, and your roads are held together with duct tape and good vibes. What's the appeal, wonders Janey. Is it the guns? Because let me tell you something, you already act like Texas right now, and last time I checked, you could pretty much shoot coyotes off your back porch. Is it the economy? While you're busy daydreaming about ditching the loony, America's economy is hardly some oil-soaked paradise. It's a house of cards held up by student debt and credit card bills. Meantime, we got Tim Hortons, universal health care, and a national identity that doesn't just scream freedom into the void. And don't even pretend it's about culture. Janey says, you want to trade poutine for deep-fried butter? The tragically hip for Kid Rock? sorry for Let's Go Brandon? No. You sit down and you think about what you're doing, because the second you cross that border and start using Fahrenheit, you're going to realize what a mistake you've made. So for all those of you Make Alberta American dreamers out there, get it together, hug a beaver, drink a Molson, accept the fact that we're weird, polite, and have social programs that actually work. And if you still want to be American, enjoy your $100,000 medical bill when you break your ankle, slipping on the same ice you could have had in Canada for free. That from Janey. That was amazing. Ron says, I love your show, Jess. I've been a podcast listener from the beginning. Thank you, Ron. He says, as for Alberta becoming a state, the main thing people don't seem to be aware of is state resources belong to the federal government in the U.S. So if we become a state, we lose our provincial oil wealth. We would become another low population, who cares state battling to get roads paved. He says we'd be just ahead of Puerto Rico. That from Ron. What about this from Debbie and Steven, who say, we just want to say we haven't particularly cared for Danielle Smith. Quite upset with her going to meet with the orange bobblehead because it felt like she was just thinking of herself. But her recent speech about supporting Trudeau in Canada I thought was excellent. She's found her Canadian personality again. Her speech felt like what Canadians think and feel. We've been very optimistic with the number of speeches that Justin Trudeau's given recently. I think this is the first Flamethrower that has praised Danielle Smith and Justin Trudeau in the same paragraph. Goes on to say, it doesn't matter what party anybody's with, it's time to think of Canada as a whole. We were just reading that the U.S. thinking of deporting Ukrainian refugees. We never realized so many swear words we could find to describe a person. Trump is bringing out the worst in people, and Canadians need to find a way to vent. Understand the booing of anthems at games, although we wouldn't do it, we understand. And as Canadians, we hope we come together to fight our neighbors down south in the true Canadian spirit. That from Debbie and Steven. How about this one from Jake, who saw me taking a swipe at lawyer Jeffrey Rath. He's the one that says he's getting this contingent, this delegation to go down and talk to the Trump administration about Alberta's statehood. Fucking bonkers, by the way. You can check out our short on it on our YouTube channel. Jake says, please spread the word on a petition to ban Jeff Rath from Canada and revoke his citizenship. He should not be allowed to, I mean, come on. He should not be allowed to enter Canada after his traitorous mission to bend the knee to the orange man. I want to let you know, by the way, we have invited Jeff Rath on the show on Monday. He has yet to get back to me. Jake says, I love you guys. A quick shout out to the guests on your last episode. He said, I relate so much to Bertrand Bickersteth when he spoke about anger. Jake says, I too tend to cope with life through anger, and hearing how he uses art to channel anger is so inspiring. And Neil Como, the counselor that was in D.C. on the trade mission, what an awesome dude, says Jake. The ability to go speak to Americans and reason with the I Speak Trump crowd gives me hope. Says, thanks for what you're doing, Neil. Jespo, thanks for giving him a voice. That from Jake. And how about this one from Lisa, who saw my conversation with Mark from Blood Sport Canada about that controversial cougar hunt. Mark says, it's good to go, right? The other side of the coin is what Real Talk's all about. She says, thanks for coming in, Mark, and trying to sanitize what cougar hunting's all about. But Lisa says, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. She says that the issue with cougar hunting boils down to the fact that it's an ugly, unnecessary sport. It has nothing to do with hunting for sustenance, but rather the thrill of the kill. And anyone with even a shred of empathy can imagine the sheer terror that these animals experience, chased relentlessly by baying dogs, treed multiple times only to be shot down. There's nothing humane about this type of hunt, and it's deeply disturbing that so-called civilized humans partake in it. Lisa says, I can't help but question the mindset behind this kind of hunting, the desire to kill an animal purely for sport rather than necessity. It raises serious ethical concerns and speaks to a troubling perspective on wildlife and respect for nature. She says there's no valid reason for this practice to continue. She says, I lived in the Elk Valley for 25 years, surrounded by hunters of all kinds. I know many wonderful, responsible hunters, people who respect wildlife and hunt for ethical reasons. Cougar hunting with hounds is not ethical. It's cruel, senseless, and serves no purpose other than feeding an unhealthy thirst for dominance and bloodlust. She says, and this isn't about an animal that's causing chaos, feeding on pets, killing livestock, or having continuous negative interactions with humans. Any animal that causes harm and destruction should be dealt with humanely and accordingly. Lisa says, thanks for the podcast. Always interesting and informative. You can be like Lisa and Lucky and everybody else and send us your flamethrower submission to talk@ryanjesperson.com. It's proudly presented by the DQs in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. When you visit them, drive through or in store, you let them know that Real Talk sent you. We'll be back next week, Monday, the Liberal Leadership Review. Who's the next Prime Minister and when's that election coming? Max Fawcett will join us a little later on in the week. We've got a roundtable focused on tech and innovation, and the group chat will be back together to talk about the political stories of the day. I will tell you, a week out, we'll have an exclusive announcement next Friday big surprise right here on Real Talk. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Harry Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.